Like it or not, Donald Trump is now a convicted felon, and that means he is banned from dozens of countries around the world. Today, we're going to tell you where the former president, your favorite president, can't go and what this means to you. This was put together by The Independent in the UK, which says that nearly 40 nations, including Canada and the United Kingdom, have strict policies when it comes to allowing individuals with criminal records across their borders. And barring a special accommodation, Trump would be held to those same standards. You may remember way back in 2000, I believe then presidential candidate George W. Bush was going to Canada for something, and he had to get a special accommodation for a drunk driving conviction. So the crimes don't have to be the highest level felonies. Countries simply say, if you've been convicted of a felony, if you've been convicted of a crime where you could have been, 1 year or more in jail, or even I saw in one Middle East country recently, 60 days more potential jail sentence, you can't come to our country anymore. And what that means is, you probably also can't get a residence permit. You also can't get a citizenship. This is one reason why you want to keep your nose clean if you want to have all the options that we talk about open, because your background matters when it comes to getting residence permits and citizenships. But let's talk about Donald Trump. Some of the big countries that he would be banned from going to as a felon. And you can leave a comment. Do you think it's fair what happened to Trump? Do you think it's not fair? Number one was Israel. Despite Trump once retweeting someone who referred to him as the king of Israel and bragging that he moved the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, Trump may not be able to visit now that he's a felon. Israel reserves the right, every country reserves the right to reject anybody. You can show up, if you don't need a visa for the country, they can ask you questions and say, we don't think you're here for the right reason. We think you're here to work. We think you're here to get married. We think you're here for whatever. Sorry, you can't come in. We've seen this, by the way, with people who are working remotely for their digital nomad type jobs. There was a woman who flew from the U.S. to the U.K. What are you doing for 3 months in the UK? They asked her. Oh, I've got a remote job. And they said, well, great. We'll find you a flight over here to go back to the US because you can't come here and work, even if it's remotely, even if it's for your existing job in the US. So every country reserves the right. This is why you want residence permits and citizenships to have a higher standard, a higher level of right. A citizenship means they have to let you in pretty much, unless you're Australia during a pandemic. And a residence permit means they're more likely to let you in, and whether it's pandemics or anything else. These countries could issue waivers for Donald Trump to go there, but obviously Donald Trump's a pretty well-known figure. The average felon is not going to get those. Canada, we mentioned with George W. Bush, according to their own government website, any U.S. citizen or permanent resident that's any felony conviction on their criminal record may be deemed inadmissible to Canada for the purposes of immigrating or even if coming merely to visit. They even retain the right to bar individuals arrested or accused of a felony crime even though you have not been convicted. Same thing in Japan. They prevent any convicted criminal from entry. Anyone convicted of a violation of any law or regulation of any country and who has been sentenced to imprisonment with or without work for 1 year or more or to an equivalent penalty can be barred from entry. Now, they do note, and this is what I want to cover here in a minute, that individuals convicted of a political offense are not subject to those rules. We've seen in some countries, we've done research, we've got an R&D team that calls and we've figured out all the little tiniest caveats of some of these residence programs and citizenships that the pure salesmen at the other companies, they don't figure it out. But we were looking at some of the residence programs, and we said, yeah, okay, what if the person's convicted of a political offense? And they said, in some cases, it doesn't make any difference. Japan, they said, it does make a difference. Now, I tend to think, and again, I'm going to come back to this in a minute, if the political offense happens in the West, it's probably less likely to be overlooked than if the political offense is, you were convicted in Russia, which Japan is one of the few Asian countries that has sanctions on Russia. So that imaging matters. The UK, unless an immigration officer is satisfied that admission will be justified for strong, compassionate reasons, they can refuse access to anyone convicted so long as the crime they committed would also be punishable by imprisonment in the UK. So that's kind of a half attempt at kind of saying, all right, if it's political, or if we don't have that same law, then you can come in. China also is the same. Now, the UK, you may remember, they keep a list of terrorists and scumbags and riffraff. There was a radio talk show host they added to that list of just, you're inadmissible, period, you can't come in. The US also maintains such a list, including if you renounce your citizenship and they say, yeah, you did it for tax reasons, and it gets to the level of the Attorney General's office. It hasn't really happened in practice, but theoretically, you'd just be on some banned list. So these countries have naughty lists. Full list of countries that restrict visits from felons: Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Cambodia, Canada, Chile, China, Cuba, the Dominican Republic. Egypt has a citizenship by investment program, so you'd be out for that. If you want to get citizenship by investment, again, you got to have a clean record. If you want to get a residence permit in most countries, you got to have a clean record. Ethiopia, Hong Kong, India, Indonesia has a residence program. Iran, Ireland has a residence program. Israel, Japan, Kenya, Malaysia has the MM2H. We love Malaysia. Nomad Capitalist Live is hosted there. If you have a felony conviction, you may not be able to come to Nomad Capitalist Live. So keep your nose, you wouldn't want to miss it. Macau, Morocco, Nepal, New Zealand, and a whole host of other countries, from Singapore to South Africa to the UAE. Here's what's interesting. You've been watching the news recently. In the UK, people are getting sentenced to a year or more in jail for social media posts. Now, I don't know what they all posted, and I may not agree with everything that they posted, but people in places like the UK and the US are angry about things like immigration. If these countries say they have freedom of speech, which the UK I don't think was ever quite as strong on that, but if they say they have freedom of speech and someone posts something on social media and it's just complaining about what the government's doing and they get arrested and given prison sentences, that to many people is a bit extreme. And yet it could impact where you could travel. Justin Trudeau brought this up back during the truckers' protests in Canada in 2022. He said, listen, if we arrest you for protesting, understand you will have that on your record, and you may not be able to visit our neighbor, the United States, anymore. You may not be able to get a passport or travel in some cases. So this has real implications. I am the goody two-shoes of the offshore business. I have been approved for numerous citizenship by investment programs, which means I had to submit criminal records in numerous different countries. One suggestion is, if you're going to get citizenship by investment, do it before you start living a nomadic lifestyle, and you have to get police reports from like 9 different countries. It can become a bit of a schlep, but fortunately I have the Nomad Capitalist team where we have case officers, so that's what we do for people. We go out and we figure out how to file for police reports online and do powers of attorney. We make our clients' lives much easier than if they were doing it on their own. If you want to live this kind of life, you've got to, stay clean. And I think what some people are saying is, in Western countries, they think the risk is going up, that they are going to get in trouble for speaking their mind. You saw during the pandemic, people in Australia, they were getting knocks on the door from the police. We don't like what you posted. Now it's in the UK. It was in Canada during those protests. People had bank accounts closed. People got in trouble. Again, you don't have to agree with what these people are doing. And I'm sure some did go too far. But I think some probably also didn't go too far. And how does that impact their ability to even travel, let alone say, I don't want to live here anymore. I want to move to the UAE. I want to move to the Philippines. I want to move to Ireland. I want to move to Argentina, is a popular one right now. I want to get Egyptian citizenship by investment or Turkish citizenship by investment. It's harder when you have a record. And I think a lot of these places aren't going to say, oh, well, you posted on social media. That doesn't sound so bad. They're just going to say you've got a criminal record. And so this is one reason I tell people, I want you to follow the law. I also understand that at a certain point, the government can do whatever they want. And what we're seeing in the Western world is the rule of law is not as strong anymore. They are wilting under the pressure of all the competition. Not only economically, they want to jack your taxes up. They're tired of people leaving to lower their taxes that we help people do. But they don't want you to have the freedoms you once had. They are becoming increasingly heavy-handed. And could that become a situation where people who are just speaking their mind, not out doing anything wrong, but just speaking their mind, could become persecuted for that? Quite possibly. And so for me, that's a reason to have different options. And it's a reason to be out of a system where you have to complain about things in a country that might come after you. That's not going to apply to most of us, but you never know. You see people in the UK going to jail for posting on social media. It is scary times. And that could affect your ability to travel. Donald Trump may be able to get a waiver to go to some of these places, especially if he were to become the president again. But understand, there are penalties in the world outside of your own country if you do commit crimes.